we are going to start by getting our dilation here. So an outline of our steps. I didn't show this yesterday, and I'll give you time to write this down later on in the hour if you need to. But these are the basic steps we're going through. We're taking our distances. Again, I'll give you a chance to write it down later. We're going to take those distances and multiply them by whatever our scale factor is. And that's going to be the new distance we go from our center. And our center here is going to be at 0, 0. So on the graph, we're going to count our distances from 0, 0 and multiply them by our scale factor. So because our scale factor in this case is 1/2, that means we're going to take all our distances and cut them in half. And that's going to create our dilation. So let's go ahead and write down each of these coordinates. Sorry, F, then G, then H. That's how the alphabet works. So F is at -2, -5. G is at -4, 0. H is at -5, -2. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at the graph and we're going to count each of our distances, and then we're going to cut those distances in half. So we're going to start with G. I'm going to start with G. G, if I look at my center and go from my center, G was 4 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. So instead of being 4 to the left, we're going to cut that distance in half, and instead we're going to go 2 to the left. Here's G prime. To get to H, H moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the left and down 2. So we're going to cut each of those distances in half. We're cutting both distances in half. So instead of going 5 to the left, let's cut that in half, and instead of going 5 to the left, I'm going to cut 5 in half. That's going to be 2.5 to the left. That's half of 5. And then instead of going down 2, let's cut that in half and go down 1. Here's H prime. And then to turn F into F prime, we're going to count our distance. 1, 2 to the left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. So instead of 2 to the left and 5 down, let's cut that in half. So instead of going 2 to the left, cut it in half, we go 1 to the left. Instead of going 5 down, cut it in half, we go 1, 2.5 down. Here's F prime. And we can go ahead and write those coordinates down. So F prime just moved to 1 and down to -2.5. I'm going to write that as 5 halves because that's half of 5. You can use 2.5 if you want. -4, 0, cut that in half. We went to -2, 0. And this moved to -5. Now, I want you to kind of look away from the graph and look at the coordinates. And I want to establish what our pattern was for each of these coordinates. So away from the graph, how can we get from these coordinates to these coordinates? Well, all we need to do is we need to take the coordinates and cut them in half. -2 became -1, cut in half. -5 became -5 halves, cut in half. -4 became -2, cut in half. So take the x coordinate, cut it in half. Take the y coordinate, cut it in half. So that is, this was called a coordinate rule when we did this with transformations. It's a general rule for the coordinates to show what happens to x and y, where x and y goes. And so we can do a similar thing here with our x and y coordinates on the last example. So taking a look at the last example, notice what happens to the coordinates. Don't write down anything yet. Notice what happens to the coordinates. 1 became 2. -1 became -2. 2 became 4. 0 became 0. What is the thing that happens? Stop writing down. Don't write it down yet. Watch so that you can see the pattern. So 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 0 stayed 0, -1 became -2. What's happening to all these coordinates, the pattern, is that I take all these numbers and double them. So why did I use 2 here when I used 1/2 on the other problem? It's because this time the scale factor was 2. So on the graph I took all my distances and doubled them. On here, I took all my distances and coordinates and cut them in half. So the pattern that you're going to use is to take all of the distances and multiply them by the scale factor. So I'm going to go down, and at the bottom of your notes should be a place to say coordinate rule, x, y moves 2, and it's going to be kx, ky. That's at the very bottom of your notes. So kx, ky is the general coordinate rule. In other words, if you just want to do it off of the coordinates, then a valid rule to do that is to take all the coordinates, multiply them by that scale factor. And that's all you need to do. So that's the process. If you want to write those steps, either on the back of your notes or kind of on a separate sheet, for those of you that like the step-by-step process, there it is for you to write down. And I'll be handing out the homework in just a minute here.